Later on in the show, we'll give an exclusive interview with the legendary man, Matt Dery, who is an analyst of the men's basketball team at Oakland University. He is also a former host of 105.1 for 17 years, also a high school teacher at UFD. Now, the topic that we are covering today is fake news. So, David, what is fake news?
That's a great question, Anthony. And my take on fake news is anything that's misleading to its audience to get popularity. What do you think, Travis?
Well, David, fake news is something we run into every day, especially if you're a student or a teacher, whatever profession you're in. It's something that we really need to be on the lookout for.
Thank you guys for your answer on fake news. Now here is the interview with Matt Dery.
We are with Mr. Matt Dery. Thank you for joining us.
Guys, great to be here, and welcome to the arena for what should be a fun night of basketball against Valpo tonight. So, pleasure to be here.
Our topic that we're going to be talking about tonight is fake news and how it affects sports. What is your opinion on fake news?
Well, first of all, guys, this whole fake news phenomenon is really gaining steam through the election. And fake news has become a hot take or a hot button topic around. But unfortunately, it affects all of us to the point where we're all on social media. We're all utilizing Twitter and Instagram, and for us old timers like myself, Facebook. And we'll read things that we believe is real, and headlines grab the attention of people, and a lot of it is not real. So journalism now has changed to the point where you really have to double and triple check if you want to get it right. But what's the consequence if you get it wrong? Or what's the consequence if you make something up? And that's the biggest issue here.
Have you ever had an encounter with fake news that it affected you? If, like, for instance, you sorted something that wasn't true and it had a backlash towards you?
Encountered fake news that affected me? Well, from a personal standpoint, unfortunately, yes. I was obviously someone that was a semi-public figure doing a radio show over the last few years at 105.1, and then when I worked at the Ticket, and before that at WDFN. And unfortunately, there are some out there that put stuff on the internet that is not true, and I guess you could call that fake news. I don't know if you want to call it that or not, but you encounter things. And as a father, as somebody that has a 15-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 13-year-old stepson, I have to sort of teach them, hey, listen, not everything you read on the internet about your dad is true, or about anybody is true. And so, yeah, it affects, I think, everybody.
It's going to keep affecting younger generations going forward?
I would hope not. I would hope that it would change and become something that would improve to the point where journalism could go back to the days of, all right, I'm going to check with my editor, I'm going to check with my boss, and make sure that we're doing it right. And that if I don't do it right, what's going to be my consequence? What's going to be, if you guys came to the game tonight and threw up on your Twitter page and somehow got people involved that a certain player was injured or a certain guy got suspended or something, and it turned out that you're just making it up in order to get clicks and to get followers, what would be the consequence for that? Would your account have to be deleted? Would your teachers at school say, you're getting an F? I don't know. There seems to be a lack of consequences and slaps on the wrist that should come out. If the president is feels so strongly against CNN and MSNBC and some of these other outlets that they're putting out fake news, should he take them to court for slander or for libel? Maybe that's where we're headed. I don't know.
Then how can fake news be limited then?
Well, it's unfortunately, I think we're in a generation now where everybody wants their 5 seconds of fame online, and it is cool to break news. It's cool to get attention and to be the person that has the story, and it makes you feel good. So I don't know how to really answer that. It's one of those things, Anthony, that you get to the point of when will Twitter go away? Is that what's going to happen, where eventually it will just shut down? Because now everybody wants their news quickly and they want it right away. So sometimes fake news from a quickness standpoint and from a clicks standpoint is better than real news. It really doesn't make any sense. What is fake? Fake news. what determines what is fake and what is real, I guess, is sometimes in the eyes of the beholder too.
Obviously, you do the Locked On Lions podcast, so you really dabble in sports and involvement. How does it affect sports, and especially players in the locker room?
I think right now, especially professional sports, players do not trust members of the media. And it's gotten to the point where I think, when I moved here in August of '96, I could tell which players had relationships with which reporters. I'm talking about just friendships or a trust. And now so many of these guys want nothing to do with these reporters based on the fact that they think if one time they get burned by this reporter that they're going to get burned again. Or this is a reporter that maybe put out a tweet that is not true. And if that... if four guys on the team tell a reporter a certain something about another player, then he goes to that. Most of the reporters in this market are pretty good, but there is a lack of trust. I saw it today. Russell Westbrook was at the NBA All-Star Media Day, and he was asked about what's it going to be like to go up against or to play with the Golden State Warriors on the same team on Sunday in the All-Star game, and he went into a whole rant about fashion and didn't answer the question. I think there's a lack of trust between athletes and reporters, and that's unfortunate because those reporters are just doing their job and they are the conduit to the fans to give them information. So there's a lack of trust right now with that, and you have to earn it. It's almost an art form where you want to buddy up with players as best you can and see that they can trust you, but you don't want to get too close because then you're going to be a shill for them and you'll be a homer for them and viewed that way. So it's a tough line to cross and to walk on.
Now, what do you mean by a homer? Is like close friends or something like that?
Yeah, I think there are some column. I'll give you an example. Mitch Albom for the Free Press and WJR has a very good relationship and a friendship with Matthew Stafford. He has him on his radio show. Matthew trusts Mitch, has him on once a week, and has had him on WJR with him probably 4 or 5 years. So if Stafford has a lousy game, and Mitch writes a column saying, well, it wasn't all his fault, it was his offensive line, or the receivers dropped the ball, some of the readers will say, well, he's a homer for Stafford because they're friends. Stafford goes on his radio show, he can't be critical of him. So it's that journalistic line where if you have a relationship with players, and I've had relationships with guys, you were sort of viewed as a homer for them, meaning you were rooting for them, that type of situation. Many years ago when I did Pistons pre-half and post-game shows on the radio for both DFN and then when I moved over to 97.1, I had a good relationship with Joe Dumars, who was the president and general manager. And I defended Joe a lot of times when things started to go a little south. And I said, look, this guy put a team in the finals, Eastern Conference Finals 6 straight years. And he needs some time. And he's rebuilding this thing. And I got accused of being kind of in the bag or a homer for Joe based on, I had made it clear, people knew I had a relationship with him. He came on the shows. We did interviews. He openly said he liked me, sometimes on the air. And so I was accused of that when I defended him. But then it got to the point where it was almost tough to defend him when the Pistons were really going downhill. And I even said, hey, look, he's not done a good job over the last few years. I still had a personal relationship with him, but I had to go on the air and kind of tell it like it is. It's a very difficult thing to do.
How much does that hurt when you hear people say that you are a homer?
Well, I think everybody has feelings and everybody wants to be respected at their work. And unfortunately, I think that's part of the deal sometimes. I know that, and I've seen this especially on social media and on Twitter, where you get a guy like Chris McCoskey, who's the Tigers beat writer for the Detroit News. And I think Chris likes the Tigers. I think he's rooting for the Tigers. I think before he was the beat writer having to cover them, I think he had a rooting interest, like, hey, I want them to do well, and maybe it's his childhood team. I don't know that. So then to get attacked by fans, if you were to say, hey, you know what, cut Brad Ausmus some slack or give him a break, and then boom, it's just social media outrage. You're nothing but a homer, and you're a slappy for the Tigers, and you should be ripping. Tough to rip a team when you have to travel, not with them on the plane, but you're at every road trip, on every home game. And you're around these guys, and he's probably closer with them or to them than these fans are. I might know that a guy's been limping in the locker room for 2 weeks and is playing on a bum ankle, and yet the readers want you to rip him. So what do? If you do rip him, then he sees you the next day and goes, hey man, what's up? So it's hard. You want to be objective, but you also, you don't want to be just killing the guys, but you don't want to be a homer. There's a middle ground you have to find, and it's nothing that's defined in a journalism class. So it goes by experience and who you're dealing with.
Is there a sport that it might affect the most, do you think?
Fake news?
Yeah.
Is there a sport that it would affect the most?
Or would it just affect them all equally?
I think it would affect them equally. I will say this, Travis, I think that the NFL is a 365-day-a-year now product. So you've got the draft. Right now is like the deadest time when we're on February, I don't even know what day it is, February 17th. And it's probably the deadest period you'll have for the NFL. Yet I can still find a way to find some topics for my podcast every day. So the NFL is a business where it's going year round. So I would assume, because it's the most powerful sport and it's number one, that it might, fake news would, I guess, have an effect on the NFL in terms of who's going to sign here, who's going to be cut, released. I mean, Tom Brady could be cut tomorrow. Like, the Pistons can't cut Reggie Jackson if they wanted to. The Tigers can't cut Miguel Cabrera if they wanted to. They'd have to pay him. But in the NFL, so many guys are being released and cut, and so that sport, I think that's because that they have that system. I would say that would be the one sport I would answer your question with.
Now, like, going back to that, how much do you think it would affect player morale, do you think, in the locker room? Like, performance-wise, maybe the whole team overall.
Player morale in terms of relationships with each other, or just?
Oh yeah, relationships with each other, maybe impact how they play.
I think this whole fake news, Twitter, rumor mill stuff brings actually teams together. I think when, last season, if I can recall, as a Cleveland Indians fan, the beat writer for the Indians, Paul Hoynes of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, put out there that once they had lost their second and third starter, Carrasco and Salazar, he wrote, no, they might win the division, but they're done. They're not going to make a run without these two guys. And every player saw it, and guys were tweeting about it, and so it brought the team together like, hey, the guy that covers us doesn't think we have a chance to win, and it rallied them. So I would say that when there's a bogus story out there and a player has to address it, I think his teammates actually come to his defense and say, hey, we saw that was on Twitter, we know it's BS, and it kind of actually brings guys closer together in a weird way. But again, it's unfortunate, but we need to figure out how to police some of this stuff.
Do you think, when it comes back to player morale, do you think coaches and with fake news it also affects them? Oh,
big time. I think a coach in the old days figured, okay, I show up for practice, I run my guys through drills, we talk, we go on the road together, I make sure everybody's behaving themselves, we play the game, we go home. Now coaches have to, even though a lot of them say they're not on Twitter or they're not on social media, they have to be aware of what's going on and almost be a therapist for players at times. They have to be the go-between between the general manager and the player to tell them, hey, listen, I know there's that report on Twitter from Fox saying that we're trading you. Let me tell you, it's bogus. Or, yes, that report's out there and just keep playing through it. So it really affects coaches, and it turns they almost have to have a different hat on, not just an X's and O's and a relationship situation, but a situation, David, where they have to play the role of almost therapist and dad sometimes to tell them, I don't know how many times this year now Stan Van Gundy of the Pistons has had to address rumors or fake news, if you want to call it that, and so it's hard on coaches. I would not. It's a tough time to have to run a team.
I'm sure today's been a rough day for the Pistons, of course, because the trade deadline coming up.
When I think about the Pistons, and I just saw this today, Mark Stein had tweeted out from ESPN that Reggie Jackson was rumored to be, they were talking to Orlando, and you look at it and you say, how many more rumors before this guy decides, well, it sounds like if all this is, like you guys are talking about fake news, well, if there's smoke, there must be fire. So I'm assuming that right now, over the All-Star break, I'm assuming Stan and his wife are trying to relax somewhere on a beach, and Reggie has probably texted him, or his agent has texted him and said, hey, what's with this latest report? And if the Pistons come out and say it's fake, or it's not true. Is that considered fake? Again, the news is that the Pistons have had talks with the Magic about Reggie Jackson. So, is it a fake story saying that they've had talks? Is it true that they've had talks? But how do you define what talks are and what real trade talks are? So, this definition of what is fake news, it causes a stir. And for the Pistons this year, because they've struggled and they have the third highest payroll in the NBA, which I didn't know until I looked it up today. How do you deal with that? It's something that I think teams are going to have to do some media training, and in their off season, bring some expert in or somebody in to go, all right, here's what we're going to do if fake news or rumors come out. Here's how we're going to handle it, and here's the protocol we want all the players to do, the front office to handle, so that we're all on the same page. Isn't that incredible? But it might be something that teams have to think about.
You were saying that the Pistons have the third highest payroll. Do you think fake news affects higher payroll teams than lower payroll? Because I feel like, thinking about it now, the higher payroll teams are more liable to having trade rumors or fake news than a team like the 76ers, who are such a low payroll team. You don't really hear a lot of rumors of trades, unless you hear about a player who's disgruntled, like Nerlens Noel, how he has been, and same with Jahlil Okafor.
Maybe you hear more about like Golden State, Cleveland, these top tier teams. Well, just in the NBA.
Well, they're always looking to add. I think it's not even a payroll thing. I think it's a contender thing. If teams are in contention to do something good, even in the NFL trade deadline, which is pretty barren, it's pretty slow. It's tough to make trades in the NFL. But I think the teams that are successful are always looking to add at their deadline, whether it's any sport. I listened to an interview today, had some time today, and I listened to an interview that Mike Babcock did on the Leafs lunch on one of the stations in Toronto, TSN Radio or whatever it is. And they asked him about the trade deadline, and he said, look, I like the team that I have here. We have a young team. This is the group I hope we have going forward. Now, he's not in charge. I mean, Brendan Shanahan's in charge of the personnel. So he was kind of debunking, if there are any of these reports that come out, let's not necessarily, take these, seriously. So I think it's the teams that are successful. But again, you could also argue, all right, what the teams that aren't successful are going to look to dump players. But like the highest payroll team in the NBA is the Cavs, and they're always looking to make a move because their owner is willing to spend money and pay money on a luxury tax. So I don't know if I kind of circled your question, David, a few times. I'm kind of dancing around it. I don't know if there is a real answer to that, but it's Twitter is a big part of it right now because everybody can get their stuff out. If talks used to go on all the time back in the day, but we didn't know about it because there was no social media. Now it's out there, and agents will leak it, or a general manager will call an agent and say, hey, listen, just to keep you in the loop, we have had some talks. That agent might have a relationship with one of these writers and need a favor, and next thing you know, it's out there. So it's scary for the families of the kids, families and kids and wives of these players who get mentioned, for sure.
These are obviously writers out there that will produce fake news for a reason. To alter the thinking of a person about a certain team, or just to create a rumor to destroy the reputation of a player.
I think most of the writers that are the big name guys in the NFL, NBA, NHL, and Major League Baseball have all been seasoned veterans that were taught the right way to handle things, and now they've got to use sourcing a little bit more, particularly with how they word things. I think the guys that are these fake news, if you want to call it that, perpetrators, a lot of them are bloggers or guys looking to make a name for themselves. I don't think a guy like Mark Stein today at ESPN was making that story up to make a name for himself. He's been around now 10, 15 years at ESPN. These NFL guys, why would Adam Schefter need to make something up? He's legitimate. He's considered the best in the business. So I think it's a lot of guys that are working for smaller websites that are trying to build up an audience, trying to maybe build up sales. And, if a guy from Bleacher Report is under pressure to get it done over a Adrian Wojnarowski at Yahoo, or a Chris Broussard at Fox, or a Mark Stein at ESPN, he may push the envelope a little bit and then come back and go, yeah, well, my source wasn't good. But now because of Twitter, you can go right on there and say, I have a source that says this. Back in the day with just newspapers, you had to go to your editor, you had to tell your editor who your source was, you had to confirm the story with the team. There was a protocol you had to go through. Now, because of social media, there is no protocol anymore.
I feel like with fans, at least, from me, my own experience, when I see these reporters come out and say, my sources, my first response is, what are your sources? Are you making it up? It's kind of sad us fans have to think that now, that we have to start questioning what are the sources. Well,
and unfortunately, and I don't want to make this a political discussion, but the president is the most powerful figure in this country. He's the most recognizable, and it's obvious that he hates the media right now, and he's called them the opposition party, and so fake news, that term is his. And so now, instead of calling it a bogus report or something that has no legs, it's he's taking very viable media services like CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and the Washington Post, and he's calling them fake news, and he gets off on it. He's enjoying throwing darts at 4 highly respected institutions, and I think that's wrong. If they get something wrong, everybody makes mistakes. But to just say, okay, let's say the New York Times messed up something, so that from here on out they're just fake news? No, they're a outlet that made a mistake. And so it's unfortunate that that's what this has come to, where we're now name-calling pretty reputable foundations of news gathering, and it is what it is.
Obviously, you got the topic of sports. You mentioned you were a teacher earlier, and what do you tell your students or advise them to stay away from fake news for whatever essays or?
It's funny because projects? I taught my first semester at U of D Jesuit High School this past fall, and I'm absolutely loving it. And one of my classes was a Journalism 1 class for juniors and seniors, and we were going over news gathering, news reporting, sports reporting. Current events, lead, how to write a lead, all these things. And a lot of times what I had to do was I had to explain to them that not everything you read on Twitter is real, and to source your stories, to get quotes, and to kind of go back to the old way of doing things as opposed to now where you're right, it's okay, if you just see something on Facebook that someone posts and it's some website that no one's ever heard of or something that you made up and you put a cool picture on it, that doesn't make that journalism. But journalism it would be, now you're right. Anybody can go online, steal a picture off of Getty Images, put it up, maybe start your own website, and it would look good. And if it looks good, just because it looks good on Facebook doesn't make it a legitimate story. So we had to kind of decipher, read through it, make sure it's legitimate. Are there quotes in there? Are there real sources in there? And almost going back to the basics. But because now, and especially during the election, there was so much out there trying to sway people's votes and opinions that we had to some days spend some time going, here's a story that is legitimate, and look at how it's written, and look at and some of the fake stuff, or you guys, we've called fake news, some of the fake stuff, poor paragraphs, run-on sentences, grammatical mistakes and punctuation, and that you could kind of tell, wow, this was kind of written, it looks like it was written by a 3rd grader, but it got the message out. So that's it was interesting semester to teach some of these things to these guys and try to show them right from wrong.
Did you only teach juniors and seniors, or?
No, my 4 classes that I have consistently are sophomore classes of 21st century media and cultural communications, and a lot of that is public speaking, speech communication. We'll do persuasive speeches. I'm going to have the guy who's working on a culminating project, a group project, informative speeches. But we have touched on, news gathering a little bit, and how 21st century media has changed in terms of when Jimmy Fallon, for example, had Donald Trump on his show and messed his hair up. Do you guys remember that? And he had on this Late Show, and he, instead of asking him questions about policy and immigration and what are you going to do about the things in the inner cities, he messed his hair up and said, I always want to mess your hair up. And so some guy wrote a blog on Time Magazine's website, a good, legitimate website, saying, man, what a clown, why couldn't he have asked him this, and this, why is he messing his hair up? And so the question was, is that entertainment, what Fallon's doing, or is he a reporter and a journalist trying to get a story? So it was a good discussion that we had, and again, it comes back to 21st century media where anybody can get online right away. And Time Magazine was good and rip what happened the night before.
So that kind of leads me back to, do you expect the kids, like the sophomores, to maybe use fake news more? Do you expect them, like we're seniors, so a lot of teachers expect us already to have it down, know what websites to trust. Do you expect more out of the juniors and seniors or even sophomores?
I hope that I have an impact on them where they will think twice about certain sites that they're on, or if they were to walk in the room and say, it's kind of funny to hear this, but Mr. Dery, I always thought that was my dad, but they'd say, oh, Mr. Dery, I saw something on the web about this, and I would say, oh, show me, and they would take out their tablet or their laptop, and I'd say, no, where's it, it might have been a story from Gawker or BuzzFeed, and some of those are 50-50, but then we've done plenty of exercises in the class where I've had them go to freep.com and Det News, at least for the local stuff, Oakland Press, MLive, and make sure that they're reading legitimate things as opposed to something that maybe their parents saw on Facebook that is from a Republican slanted or Democratic slanted website that looks like it was thrown together in 5 minutes. So I hope they get it, and I'm hoping I'm making an impact on them. What do you guys think? What do you say about that?
What information would you be looking for if you're looking at a website, how to find it more reliable than fake?
Well, I think if they're going to be quoting ESPN, I would hope that they would add some hyperlinks and some links on there. So if they're saying ESPN, if they're writing a blog story about an ESPN report and they're trying to discredit it or they're trying to quote it, the link better be in there. You better be adding real quotes, real links if you're just trying to bum a story off somebody else. If a friend of yours comes up to you and says, oh, I heard on ESPN that the Pistons are trading Andre Drummond, and you write a blog about it and you say ESPN says, there better be a link with it. So what I'm looking for is a link. If you just say, well, I had heard from a friend, that's not good enough. So you want to include quotes, links. You also want to see, we made a phone call to the Pistons and their PR guy said no comment. Make an effort. Don't just go with it to get clicks. Actually pick up the phone and call and do some follow-up. So I like seeing that where it says a spokesman said no comment. At least you're trying to get that comment.
Do you think there's like news stations that you could go for more reliable news?
Nationally or locally?
Yeah. On television.
I mean, I still think when you get home, at night and maybe you're working a night shift and you want to get caught up on the day of local news, I would still say that Fox 2 would be my first choice. I think they do a really good job. I think Huel Perkins is tremendous. Channel 7, Channel 4, and Fox 2 usually are still pretty reliable. It's crazy to hear, you're right, the president refer to some place like the New York Times, which is, considered the best newspaper in the country. And he's calling them fake news. So I still think when you turn on the television, you're getting reliable reporting. Fox News, even though they sort of have the Republican slant, I think you're still pretty safe on TV. I don't know of any TV networks where I can say it's fake. TMZ, I guess, but what at least they do is they've got the camera right on the guy and they're asking him. I think the internet is where we're really finding a lot of this bogus stuff.
What do you think we can do, or the government can do, like we could say, to regulate what can be put on the internet, or who can post on it? Is there anything we can even do about that, or is it really just up to humans being using their head and actually thinking about before they hit that publish?
I think it's a great question. I think this is something that has to be started to get regulated. I think the last thing we want to do is have to hold everybody's hand and say it has to be reliable. But right now, there's way too much freedom on there, I think. And it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. Some of it is slanderous and libel. Some of it is personal attacks and things that, I would say that hopefully this administration or the next one or whomever can get some sort of group together to get with the folks that run Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, whatever, and come to some sort of conclusion on if someone puts out something personal and slanderous and libelous, that it immediately it's deleted or it goes through some sort of check and balance, because something does have to be done. It's starting to get pretty dangerous. I agree.
It obviously has an effect on like younger kids. I know some parents don't allow their kids to get a Twitter or Facebook even past the age of like 12.
I agree. I think my 15-year-old is on most of the social media stuff because I think he's pretty responsible. But I did have to tell him, I want your account private. So some of the trolls can't get to him. It's dangerous. It really is. And especially now with what's going on politically in this country and how there's so much division, there's a lot of anger out there. So if a mom of a 14-year-old is on Facebook just destroying the Democratic side all the time and constantly harping on this and that, and then another parent tells their daughter, and then the daughter goes to school and says, well, my mom says your mom's crazy on Facebook, and it's pretty dangerous. So yeah, I would say, or parents of kids, make sure you go over just about everything with them. I heard Mark Cuban was on a Dallas radio station the other day. My buddy does a show down there, Dan McDowell, and he had Cuban in studio. And Cuban told them, when I put my 13-year-old on Instagram or one of these, Cuban and his 13-year-old daughter actually read through the rules and regulations together. I think that's really good parenting. I think it's pretty smart.
I think that's it from us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That was our exclusive interview with Matt Dery. Now here are some statistics.
All right, everybody. The percentage of top-performing fake news stories on Facebook in 2016 that were about U.S. politics was around 46%. Number of shares, reactions, and comments on fake news articles about U.S. politics on Facebook in 2016 was 10.6 million. And the number of shares, comments, and reactions for the top-performing fake news articles on Facebook in 2016 were 2.1 million.
Now let's take a moment to thank my co-hosts, Brandon, Travis, and David. We appreciate the time that you took out of your day to listen. Now, Anthony Mash, signing off.